we are ready to start, and on behalf of Learning General Surgery, the team, we welcome Dr. Lakshmi, who is, I think she's still straight come from the OT. Sorry, ma'am, to pull you out, and it's a privilege and pleasure to have you today. And I shall hand over to Bhavin to take it from here.
Surely, sir. I think, madam, we can start from your talk.
Sure.
If you can just share your screen if possible.
Yes, I'll do. So I'll start my talk today on management of achalasia of cardia. The first surgical intervention was performed by Dr. Ernest Heller in 1913, and that's how the treatment procedure bears his name. But it was not actually called achalasia till an article by Dr. Arthur Hurst mentioned the treatment for achalasia of cardia, which was called cardiospasm at that time. And Ellis et al. Described the transthoracic approach first in 1958. That is for the history of this procedure. Now coming to the actual disease, what is achalasia? Achalasia is aperistalsis of the esophageal body with a hypertonic lower esophageal sphincter. And this is usually due to degeneration of the neurons in the esophageal walls, and it is the second most common benign disorder of the esophagus which needs a surgical intervention. And histopathologically, achalasia patients show decrease in the neurons of the myenteric plexus. Now these neurons normally secrete nitric oxide, which contributes to the lower esophageal sphincter relaxation. So because there is a decrease in the nitric oxide production, there is a significant increase in the cholinergic secretion because cholinergic neurons are preserved. So there is increased tone of the lower esophageal sphincter, or the lower esophageal sphincter tone is maintained, and there is decreased relaxation. That is how the whole disease process starts, and gradually this leads to aperistalsis in the rest of the esophagus. Now coming to etiopathogenesis, primary achalasia is idiopathic, considered to be idiopathic, but there are few theories where the HLA studies have shown that there are presence of anti-myenteric antibodies. So some propose that it could be an autoimmune disorder. Some have shown an association with chronic herpes zoster or measles, and T-cell evaluation of patients with achalasia has shown to reactivity of the HSV1, which may suggest that achalasia happens when there is HSV1 infection. So there are different theories, but basically it is a idiopathic disorder with all these theories which are now coming into vogue, which may in future we don't know towards what it will progress. Now there is something called secondary achalasia, and secondary achalasia is due to a protozoan infection, Trypanosoma cruzi, which is called Chagas disease, and this organism damages the ganglion cells in the orbit plexus. One more thing, when you are evaluating patients for achalasia, and if the patient is an elderly patient who is complaining of sudden onset of symptoms which are less than 6 months, along with excessive weight loss, and then your endoscopist or you yourself doing your endoscopy are feeling that there is a difficulty in passing the endoscope beyond the GE junction, then we have to think of a possible GE malignancy which can mimic achalasia. This is called pseudoachalasia. Then achalasia incidence is around 1.6 per 1 lakh population, and so it is a very infrequent disease. So that's why the various modalities of treatment, it is difficult to do a comparison study comparing one modality of treatment to another modality of treatment, and the incidence is equal in men and women and usually occurs in the 20 to 50 years age group. And the most common clinical manifestations of achalasia being dysphagia, usually to food, solid food is more than 90%, and to liquids is more than 80%. So this is not seen with the other motility disorders of the esophagus, where dysphagia is there but not so significant to any of the solid or liquid diet. And the other symptoms would be a minimal weight loss unless it's a improper diagnosed eclasia. Usually the patients will come present of some weight loss, and usually they'll have regurgitation. Mainly it is nocturnal, so patient will come tell you that when they sleep at night, they will be regurgitating frothy fluid, and then retrosternal pain and heartburn can be there, or some patient may feel that there is something stuck in the throat, and with the long duration eclasia, they may complain of hiccups. So coming to diagnosis, usually the early part, the diagnosis may be missed because the symptoms are slow and gradual. But most important thing is, if the patient is complaining of dysphagia, at least we should do a barium swallow and endoscopy. Manometry may not be available in all places. So barium is most easily doable test and is an excellent tool for diagnosis of eclasia, and the classical bird beak appearance, which we are seeing, we are learning from the days of our MBBS. This is one important investigation and one important finding which will clinch the diagnosis. So this is the important. So for residents and fresh general surgery students, this picture is very important, and this is the classical bird beak appearance we see on a barium swallow. So if your barium is not, or you're seeing a patient very early in their progression to the classical eclasia, your barium may not give you the exact bird beak appearance. So in these cases where the patient is still complaining of symptoms which are very suggestive of eclasia, but your barium is not very classical, then you should do the manometry. Manometry is very, very helpful in this. It will show a raised lower esophageal sphincter pressure, usually above 45 millimeters of mercury, and there is incomplete relaxation of the lower esophageal sphincter on swallowing. So aperistalsis, then you may also find aperistalsis of the esophagus, or there may be simultaneous contractions which are usually of low amplitude. But there are certain set of patients where we use the term vigorous eclasia, where they'll have little higher amplitude contractions, and these are the patients who will have more amount of chest pain. So whenever you have a patient where it's diagnosed either through a barium or through a manometry that there is eclasia, you should always do a endoscopy to rule out malignancy. So usually you will see a large baggy esophagus with retained food like this, and then you will see a pinpoint opening of the lower esophageal sphincter, but usually with a gentle nudge, your endoscope will go into the stomach. And if you have any doubt of any thickening or nodularity in the lower esophageal sphincter, then you have to further do endoscopic ultrasound or a CT scan. But these are only when you suspect a malignancy, that is a secondary eclasia or pseudoeclasia. But otherwise, a barium with endoscopy or barium plus manometry plus endoscopy are enough to clinch the diagnosis. Now coming to the treatment options. Usually we have 4 types of treatment options. So let us discuss each one. Medical therapy is usually with calcium channel blockers, usually given half an hour before the meals, and they give some degree of relaxation of the lower esophageal sphincter. This is not recommended as a first line therapy. This is usually where you have a diagnosed patient and patient needs some time before he's planning his definitive treatment and is not able to eat. Then you can start them on calcium channel blockers, but it should not be the only treatment, because the patients will never do well with the only medical therapy as the treatment. Then we have botulinum toxin injection. So Botox usually inhibits the release of acetylcholine. Now, we already read in the pathophysiology that because the nitric oxide production is reduced and the acetylcholine production is still preserved, so if we reduce the release of acetylcholine, then the lower esophageal sphincter tone will come down. So here this is done endoscopically, where you inject around 1 ml of Botox, which contains almost 20 to 25 units of Botox per ml into 4 quadrants, approximately 1 centimeter above the Z line. So it is done endoscopically, and above the Z line in 4 quadrants you inject 1 ml of the Botox. And the complications can be mediastinitis or ulceration of the esophageal mucosa, or if you penetrate through the esophagus, then you can end up with a pneumothorax. So this needs a little endoscopic expertise. And the downside of Botox is that it is not as effective as the further interventions we are talking of. It's better than medical treatment, but it's not as better as a dilatation or a surgery. Initially, symptomatic relief we will see in the 90% of patients, but gradually the symptom relief will fall down to 50%, and by end of 1 year, the symptoms will all recur. So this should be preserved for patients who are not fit for any other interventions, mainly if you are seeing in elderly or very frail patients where they are not fit for any other intervention, there only you opt for a Botox treatment. Then comes the pneumatic dilatation. So this is considered the most effective non-surgical treatment of eclasia. Here we pass a pneumatic device into the lower esophageal sphincter using under fluoroscopic guidance endoscopically, and the balloon is inflated to a pressure of 7 to 15 Pascal units. And normally, earlier it was inflated to a significant extent, and there was always chances of perforation. But now, if the waist of the balloon disappears on the fluoroscopic observance, then you stop the dilatation there. You have to observe the patient for at least few hours, and then the patient can be discharged home. And the two best predictors of success are the post-dilatation pressures, or some people also see the difference between the pre and the post-dilatation pressures. And elderly people do well because their muscle tone is as such weak. But one of the biggest problem which can happen with pneumatic dilatation is esophageal perforation, which can be as low as 1.6% in expert hands, but can also go up to a high almost of 20%. So next we come to the proper surgical intervention, that is the Heller's myotomy. At the beginning only we learned that this was first performed by Ernest Heller in 1913, and that is how his name happens to be put on the surgery. And it involves performing a anterior myotomy, either abdominal or the thoracic approach. And thoracic approach has certain drawbacks, so we will only talk on the abdominal myotomy. And laparoscopic myotomy is now considered the standard operation because the results are similar to an open myotomy, with the advantage of minimal access surgery, smaller wounds, lesser wound problems, and shorter hospital stay. But there are few questions to be considered when you are considering Heller's myotomy. It is, what is the length of the myotomy, and whether we should do a fundoplication. If so, what kind of fundoplication to be done, and what if the patient has a sigmoid esophagus. And now is the era of robos. So is there any benefit of a robo? I will not comment on the benefit of robo because robo is not widespreadly available now, but the rest of the other points we will discuss now. So whether to do a fundoplication or not. So 30% of the patients post a successful fundoplication complain of significant heartburn, and 24-hour pH metry has shown almost 60% of the patients having significant reflux. So it is better to, it's recommended to perform a concurrent anti-reflux procedure. Now we have a choice, and we always prefer a partial fundoplication, not a complete fundoplication, because a complete fundoplication will again cause a recurrence of the eclasia, because here we are tightening of the lower esophageal sphincter again. So either we do a anterior 180-degree door fundoplication or a posterior 270-degree toupee fundoplication. And there is no significant difference whether you are doing a door or a toupee when you are looking at the degree of dysphagia or looking at the resolution of the gastroesophageal reflux. So there is no randomized control trial to compare these two procedures. So you can do any of them, but the anterior door has an added advantage is that it buttresses the lower end of the esophagus where the mucosa is bare, and usually the lower end of the just at the lower esophageal sphincter the mucosa is the thinnest, so there's always chances that there can be small micro perforations when you are doing the surgery. So a buttressing with the stomach doing anterior door will patch up these small micro perforations which we could have missed. Now coming to a sigmoid esophagus, there you see a dilated tortuous esophagus with lot of food stasis. This usually is seen in patients who have neglected their eclasia for a long time, and earlier most of these patients were thought to require a esophagectomy, or at least we should not add a fundoplication either door or toupee to these patients. But now it is seen that a properly done extended myotomy gives improvement in the sigmoid status of the esophagus in the long run. So always first do a proper cardiomyotomy in patients even though they have a sigmoid esophagus, and then wait and follow up how the esophagus is behaving. Now coming to the length of the myotomy, it is said that you need at least a 5 centimeter myotomy with a 1 centimeter on extending onto the cardia of the stomach. But we normally do a 7 centimeter myotomy with a 2 centimeter extension onto the cardia of the stomach, what we call the extended myotomy, and this has given better resolution of the symptoms. Now coming to the surgical procedure, the patient is put in lithotomy position, and that's the port placement. So here we have a 10 mm supraumbilical port. This is for the camera, and then we have a 5 mm port in the epigastrium for the liver retraction, or if you have a Nathanson liver retractor, your Nathanson liver retractor can come through the epigastric region, and then your left hand port comes 5 mm in the right midclavicular region, and the right hand port comes in the left midclavicular region. And for the traction, we have a 5 mm port in the left anterior axillary line. So this is the port placement. Now coming to the video. So we start from the pars flaccida and go anterior to the esophagus to mobilize the esophagus. At least 10 centimeters of the esophagus should be mobilized. When mobilizing the esophagus, we should make sure that we are not damaging the vagus, and then we start the myotomy. So here you should see that I am using the non-active end of the harmonic when I am doing the myotomy. So because if the active end, the thermal injuries because of the active end coming in contact with the mucosa can present later. Means the patient is, you feel the surgery has done well, and then the patient presents with esophageal perforation presenting late. So this is because of the thermal injuries of the active blade touching the mucosa, and then we do a anterior door wrap. So you see that wrap is totally covering the exposed esophageal mucosa and acts as a nice buttress to it. So this is one video which I am showing of what would happen if your esophageal mucosa gives way. This is myotomy I did in a small child, just 5-year-old, who came all the way from Bangladesh. You see, he has a very small, tiny esophagus and very friable mucosa. So as we were gently separating the muscle fibers, the mucosa gave way here. So 2 or 3 sutures of 3-0 vicryl is placed. So even if the mucosa gives way when you are operating, don't panic. Just suture the mucosa properly and then put a anterior wrap. The child was kept nil by mouth for a couple of days, and then we did a gastrographic swallow to see if there's no leak, and then he did well, and then we started his liquids. So we have one more new approach to eclasia, what we call the POEM procedure. So it is called peroral endoscopic myotomy. So here they do endoscopically, we enter the submucosal plane around 15 centimeters above the GE junction, and the endoscope has a special transparent cap, and using a solution with a small amount of methylene blue or indigo dye, the submucosal plane is elevated by injecting the saline, and then the tunnel dissection is carried from 15 centimeters proximal to GE junction to say 2 centimeters past the GE junction, and then the myotomy is started 10 centimeters proximal to the GE junction. Normally in our surgical myotomy, we separate both the circular and the longitudinal muscle fibers, but here only the circular fibers are taken while leaving the longitudinal muscle fibers are left intact, and then at the end of the procedure the scope is removed and the point of submucosal entry is closed with endoscopic clips. My endoscopist Dr. Rakesh Adi was gracious enough to share his POEM video with us, because I said this is a teaching thing. So this is how they raise the submucosal bleb, and then they injecting the saline, and with cautery they open the mucosa and the submucosa, and they go between the circular muscle and the submucosa till they go into the stomach. And then once they have made sure that they're in the stomach, then they start the myotomy. So this is very helpful for type 1 and type 2. That's, you can see they are splitting the circular muscle fibers only, not going to the longitudinal fibers. Now this is very helpful for type 1, type 2 eclasia, but the downside is that you cannot do a fundoplication. So they may end up with some degree of reflux. If it's severe, then they may need to undergo a fundoplication later. And that is the mucosal clips which they are putting at the end of the procedure. And then this needs lot of skill, which most of the endoscopists may not be successful in doing. So if surgeons are practicing to do POEM, I think then the results would be better, because I had the opportunity to redo a myotomy in 2 patients where they had undergone POEM and the myotomy was not complete. So it needs skill and understanding of the anatomy of the esophagus. So let us just have a quick algorithm, because we learnt of so many treatment options for eclasia. So let us see that how do we use them judiciously. So medical treatment, if you are only suggested if you are waiting as a stopgap before you are doing a definitive treatment, either it could be a pneumatic dilatation or a Heller's myotomy or a POEM. And Botox if the patient is not a good anesthesia risk and not a good surgical candidate. And if it's a young patient, we can offer them pneumatic dilatation, but there's always explain them the risk of perforation. And if the patient is not willing to accept the perforation rate, then cardiomyotomy, LAP, Heller's myotomy is the best treatment of choice. So, and it has given very good results, and it should be either accompanied with DOR or Toupet fundoplication and at least 5 centimeters, but I would suggest at least make the whole length of the myotomy 10 centimeters. So go at least 7 centimeters onto the esophagus and 2.5 centimeters onto the stomach. Robo has good role in future when robos become more easily affordable. And POEM has good promise. I think it needs more skilled people doing it. So I thank you all for a patient hearing, and thank Dr. Radhakrishna and LGS for giving me the opportunity to present this before you all.
Thank you, ma'am. It's a very neat and complete presentation. Bhavin, are you there? There are 2 questions in the chat box. The first question is from Mahesh Raj. He wants to know whether the right port is at the mid-clavicular line. The right port.
Right hand, yes. Right hand, left mid-clavicular.
Now, Dr. Govind wants to know that if there is a perforation, only mucosa has to be sutured or anything more than that?
Mucosa has to be sutured and buttressed with a DOR fundoplication.
Okay. Somebody is asking how easy or how hard is it to do a redo Heller in primary failed Heller?
Yeah, to redo a primary failed Heller, first you should done adequate amount of primary Hellers, because it is knowing the planes. Otherwise, directly you will go and open the esophagus. Because I have done maybe 3 redo primary Heller, where the mucosa goes and gets adherent to the hiatus, if not hiatus, to the left lobe of the liver. So you have to be ready to tackle esophageal perforation. So that's why first become perfect in doing primary Heller, and then you have to be very careful in going into do the redo Heller.
Bhavin, are you back?
Yes.
You want to take the questions in the chat box. Krishna Adhikari's questions onwards.
Can you hear me? Yeah, surely. Yes, surely. I think there are multiple questions. One more question is: routine pH study is necessary before after POEM?
No, if a patient is symptomatic, very symptomatic, then.
And madam, let me ask you a controversial question: when do you refer patient for POEM?
I don't refer patients for POEM.
Actually,
which is better in which condition? I wanted to ask.
I would tell you, POEM is for a young patient who is just starting his eclasia, maybe just the dysphagia thing. Maybe if you halt it at that time, his esophageal motility and all won't get damaged. Means I would talk like a true true physician. We should think only of good of the patient. And or if you have a very elderly patient who is not willing for surgery, but still could be a good surgical risk, there you can refer them for a.
The Chalpati Rao is there in the audience. Chalpati, you can unmute and answer that question regarding when the patient should be referred to you and not for surgery.
Yeah. Hi. Nice talk, madam. Right. So, see, right now there are good comparative trials comparing POEM versus Hellers. Now there is good long-term data also beyond 2 years and 5 years comparing Hellers and POEM. And now the results are equal. The technical success or the clinical success, both are equal. So, now it's been almost 11 years that POEM is into practice with now good long-term data. So when do you go for POEM? I would put it in the other way. from the gastroenterologist perspective, if the patient is having type 2 sigmoid esophagus, I'm talking about sigmoid esophagus, it may be difficult for POEM can be still done in type 1 sigmoid esophagus, but type 2 sigmoid esophagus, it will be very difficult. Patients who have already some kind of previous esophageal surgeries, then POEM may be difficult. So I would put it in this way rather than otherwise. POEM is good in all types of achalasia with equally good results, especially type 3 achalasia, and other non-achalasia esophageal motility disorders. POEM is very good, like nutcracker esophagus, etc. Diffuse esophageal spasm like that. POEM is very good. pH study, we are trying to understand the mechanisms of GERD post-POEM. So in a research protocol, we are doing pH study after POEM and also a follow-up endoscopy, because not all POEM patients are subjected for a fundoplication, though there is a new procedure called FPOEM, that is fundoplication, endoscopic fundoplication coupled with POEM, though it is still in a very premature state. So we are trying to understand the mechanisms of GERD. So that's why we are doing pH in all our follow-up patients. We are doing at our center regularly. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. There is one more question for you. That is, why lateral incision not given in POEM? Either it is anterior or posterior.
Yeah, because scope maneuverability is very easy, especially with the posterior POEM, and it is easy to navigate towards the G junction and across G junction by choosing either anterior or posterior approach. The other thing, actually, one of the previous participant has asked about redo Hellers after a failed Hellers. So as madam told, it will be very, very difficult. So in that case, the advantage of POEM is Hellers myotomy is, to my understanding, it's an anterior procedure. Okay, anterior myotomy. But for POEM, we can either choose anterior or posterior. So if Hellers has failed after an anterior approach, we can always go for a posterior POEM. So now the standard of care is, if a Hellers myotomy has failed, either you subject these patients for a posterior approach of POEM or a pneumatic dilatation, because Hellers is very difficult.
I think another reason in favor of POEM is POEM generally longer myotomy, and one of the most of Hellers myotomy failure is the length of myotomy, particularly on the cardiac side, gastric cardiac side. I think some studies are showing that POEM is better in that. What's your take on that?
I agree. Actually, the standard length post G junction is around 3 centimeters that we maintain in POEM. And now we have started reducing the esophageal length of myotomy. So for example, if it is a straightforward type 1 achalasia, sometimes we are just doing only 5 to 6 centimeters of myotomy on the esophageal side. So that is giving good results as per the literature also. Now there is one trial that has come up, longer myotomy versus a shorter one. Shorter one has given equally good results.
Yes.
Bhavin, Dr. Kanchan has asked this question: what is the etiopathogenesis for recurrent achalasias? I want all of you to.
I think.
Will you be dealing with it?
I've made a small presentation. I'm going to just.
I'll ask Dr. Lakshmi.
Yes, that would be great.
That would be great. Recurrent achalasias. One of the participants asked.
First is, if the patient has undergone any of the things like botulinum or endoscopic dilatation or inadequate Hellers, that is technical reasons for recurrence. And one more is achalasia. Here we are in achalasia, we are not treating the primary pathology. Means we are not the loss of the neurons, which continues in the orbic plexus. So that persists. So in some patients, unfortunately, it progresses proximally. So there's more and more amount of esophageal motility. Actually, it is more than this thing, the lower esophageal sphincter, which is causing harm. Now it's the motility which gradually goes off in the whole length of the esophagus, which is responsible for the recurrence of the symptoms. So that is how these patients come back to you with the same thing of dysphagia. Because for the patient, he came with dysphagia, got some treatment, and again has come back with dysphagia. So it goes to be projected as a failure of the myotomy, but usually it's the progression of the disease.
Does Shalpati have a comment on that?
Yeah, that's okay, sir. I think I concur with madam.
Okay, ma'am, we have two more questions. One is Dr. Krishna Adhikari wants to know whether you do a leak test if mucosal after repairing mucosal injury.
No, never, not immediately on table. See, one is in eclasia. First, you have to see that there's a lot of mucosal inflammation because of stasis. So at that time, don't try to do anything like putting air or putting any contrast. So you may induce a leak because of suddenly the mucosa is just giving. It's very delicate. So don't do anything at that time. Close the mucosa and then you buttress it with the stomach patch and then wait for 48 hours and then you do a contrast leak test with a gastrographic.
So from the Facebook group, Dr. Viral Bhatt asks, why is Nissen fundoplication not done?
Nissen fundoplication is for reflux, where we want to increase the lower esophageal sphincter tone. Here in eclasia, we have a normal or an increased lower esophageal sphincter tone. If you are doing the whole thing, either POEM, surgery, endoscopy or botulinum, to decrease the lower esophageal sphincter pressure. So if you are doing a proper fundoplication again, then again you are increasing the lower esophagus and you are getting the two edges of the esophagus together when you put a complete wrap. When you are doing a partial wrap, we are actually suturing the partial wrap and the myotomy edges to the crura. So that keeps the myotomy edges apart. So you should never do a fundoplication for Heller's.
Thank you. Any other question from the audience? You can unmute and ask.
I think there is one question, sir. Is the intraoperative endoscopy done to confirm completeness of myotomy?
Oh, yeah.
Earlier, when we were using single chip systems and all, the vision was not great. But now with high definition systems, you can see the total muscle fibers all separating and the mucosa pouting out brilliantly. So in our center, we never do endoscopy because any intervention, endoscopy, dye test, installation of any contrast, there's always a chance by some maneuver that your mucosa will give way. We never put anything through the esophagus once the myotomy is done. Few centers do, they transilluminate and see, but already from the surgical side, we are seeing that all the fibers are separated. So endoscopy will not give you much unless you are not sure about the completeness of the myotomy. So normally people do endoscopy to see whether they've crossed the GE junction and all. But over time, you all know, we understand where the GE junction is and that you're coming onto the stomach properly, that you are splitting the sling fibers and all. These are what a surgeon needs to learn rather than endoscopist coming there and telling you that you have to still some more fibers left or.
No, but I think the endoscopist sees the sling fibers better than the surgeon, because one of the things which I always find difficulty is locating the GE junction. There's some fat over there, and should we remove that fat,
Yes.
that pad to really look at the thing, or is it okay?
Belsey pad of fat has to be removed.
And again, to avoid anterior vagal injury is not that easy. It comes obliquely. Sometimes it will come across that area where you want to split the muscle. How do you deal with that anterior vagus?
Usually when we are doing a Nissen fundoplication or a cardiomyotomy, the posterior vagus is more important because anterior vagus, the course is not perfect, and sometimes it is in form of multiple fibers. So we are not sure whether we are damaged the anterior vagus or not. So always when you are mobilizing the esophagus, make sure that your posterior vagus is intact.
the other thing I also noticed, ma'am, that when you are onto the gastric fiber, there is some bleeding,
Yes.
which is not there in the esophageal side. And we keep on using bipolar. And how do you manage it?
You
That
should
time,
never use bipolar or harmonic anything. Just take a wet gauze piece and just leave a pressure on it.
okay.
It
That
needs
will-
only patience, because that is the usage of diathermy or energy source to control this bleeding usually causes lateral spread of the energy onto the mucosa, and in the post-op the mucosa gives way.
Yeah, Bhavin, back to you.
Yeah, sir. Gautam is there?
And Gautam is unwell today. He said
Okay,
he's
okay,
running
okay.
fever. So,
Okay.
in our unit, we are all worried now because, only one person has just recovered. So we are very.
No, sir,
Is Gautam there? Gautam, are you there? No, I don't think he is.
No, you will be fine, sir. Our hospital is like hotspots, and almost we all must have developed
I know.
antibodies. So most of the time,
Gautam escaped till today, but today morning he said, afternoon he went off with little fever, sore throat. We think he is almost there. Anyway,
I hope he recovers soon. I think.
Thanks, Dr. Lakshmi, for
I
a
think
wonderful lecture, and all the questions answered so well. Bhavin, you can take.
Yeah, I will start. I just made a small presentation thinking that literature review is the. I think Gautam will be doing an excellent job. So I generally do not bother much about that. But anyway, I have prepared that.
Yeah, sure.
So, can you see the screen, sir?
No, not yet.
Just whether I have shared or not.
Meantime, Prathapan, you have any comments on this?
I didn't hear complete. I think the gastroenterologist till the poem was in existence. They were referring for LS myotomy. Now slowly they are taking back their patient.
Sir, I think there is some problem. I'm rejoining again after
Okay.
disconnecting. Just wait for some time.
Well, you agree with that, Dr. Lakshmi, that the referral from gastroenterologist has come down for HLS after the poem has come? Because actually, maybe, I don't know, Charapati should not get upset. I think, is it being overdone, the poem?
I think the number of, if we see the incidence of eclasia and the number of poems being done, I think more.
Sir, can you see the screen?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I think let us complete the discussion.
Yes.
Yeah, ma'am.
I think more poems are being done for
Dr. Lakshmi, you were saying something.
esophageal motility disorders. I feel that because seeing the incidence of eclasia, it's around 1 to 2%, but the number of poems which are being done is so high. So
yeah, suddenly the numbers have exploded like anything. When I think we weren't doing those many HLS.
Cardiomyopathy. Maybe for our unit, maybe 10 HLRs in a year. 10 HLRs in a year. But now we are seeing they're doing 10 myotomies in a month. So
yeah, Charapati, your rejoinder to it.
We always wonder how do gastroenterologists get so many of patients of eclasia.
Yeah. So actually, partially I don't have any comments for this. But in my practice, when we have added high resolution manometry in our practice, we saw at least 9 cases of hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Right. So we have seen almost 9 cases in 6 months. I don't know why. So I think, but partially, as I said, I don't have any comments on that. But in my practice, to the surprise, initial 4 years, I did not have manometry. I could hardly diagnose 3 cases probably. But when we added the high resolution manometry, we could diagnose 9 cases in 6 months, and all of them we did POEM for in our center. So I don't know, probably because of we don't have the investigation modality, we may not be suspecting. I don't know.
Dr. Anjali, you have any comment on this?
No, sir.
Okay. Yeah, Bhavin.
Yeah, should I start?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a brief talk on surgical failures, and I have limited myself to surgical failures and basic take-home messages. So I think most of the thing Madam has described beautifully. I don't want to add anything. We all know laparoscopic myotomy with partial fundoplication is the treatment of choice for achalasia. Now, what are the reasons of myotomy failure? So various studies demonstrated the most common reasons or causes is the first is the mega esophagus or grade 4 esophagus. I will describe it in detail. Another cause of failure of persistent symptoms of gastroesophageal reflux, which is more commonly seen after POEM. Third is tight fundoplication. Tight fundoplication is not that common in experts' hands, but still it can be one of the cause of cardiomyotomy failure. And most common cause is inadequate myotomy. It can be caused either by incomplete section of muscle fibers or by healing when fibrosis occurs at the myotomy edges. Now, mega esophagus is generally divided into 4 grades. When diameter is less than 4, it is known as grade 1, 4 to 7, grade 2, 7 to 10, grade 3, and more than 10, grade 4. In grade 4 esophagus, chances of failures are much higher. And in ancient days, people were recommending esophagectomy. Now, very few people need esophagectomy even for grade 4. But failure rates are typically higher in this subgroup of patients. Now, cardiomyopathy, myotomy certainly has a greater chances in large sigmoids in grade 4, as I said. But in these patients also, myotomy is still the I would say the treatment of choice before offering them the esophagectomy, and esophagectomy should be at the last resort. Another problem post myotomy, POEM or inadequately performed laparoscopic cardiomyotomy is gastroesophageal reflux. Generally nowadays we do not see this problem much because we always add some kind of fundoplication. And second, as Dr. Lakshmi has said, that Heller's myotomy is particularly an anterior dissection of esophagus, and we do not disturb its posterior attachment much. So because of that, and on top of that, we had anterior fundoplication. So gastroesophageal reflux is not seen very commonly in this group of patients. In a few patients where gastroesophageal reflux develop post-surgery, generally these are mild GERD and easily controlled mostly by PPI. So GERD has been described as a cause of failure or cause of persistent symptoms post-myotomy. But in actual practice, it is not that severe to be worried about. Now, most common cause of failure is particularly incomplete myotomy in grade 1, 2, or 3 esophagus. Grade 4 esophagus is a separate cause of failure. Tight fundoplication, we already described in properly performed cases, is the rare cause. So basically, we are debating about how much myotomy is necessary. Now, initially, it was thought that particularly on gastric side, 5 centimeter on the esophagus side, 1.5 to 2 centimeter on the gastric side is adequate myotomy. But on gastric side, the myotomy on gastric side is the most common cause of failure because the plane of between submucosa and muscle layer is less evident compared to esophagus. Second, as Dr. Pattasar rightly pointed out, bleeding is more likely. So due to that bleeding fear, we may perform inadequate myotomies. And these difficulties explain why in most series, recurrence after surgery is where due to incomplete myotomy rather than the disease process itself. But yes, progression of disease is one of the other causes where your myotomy may fail. Now, there is big debate about long versus short myotomy. I will, if you can go through this paper, they fantastically described the technique of laparoscopic hilar myotomy.
Wait,
But nowadays it is suggested that at least 3 centimeter myotomy in gastric side gives better results. Some studies shown that, but I think Dr. Rao has mentioned about this paper where they have showed that actually the size of myotomy 1.5 to 2 versus 3 did not show much difference in the result. But apart from this few papers, most of the studies showed that longer myotomy and gastric side is the way to prevent myotomy failure. And that is why some studies, in particularly type suggest POEM, because POEM consists of longer myotomy in gastric side. So what are the predictors of good outcome post laparoscopic hilar myotomy? First is young patient, tortuous esophagus, type 2 disease. Type 2 disease is the in which the surgery gives the best result. What are type 1, type 2, type 3 disease? I will describe. And another one is esophageal diverticulum. That also gives a good result post laparoscopic hilar myotomy. So these are the causes where you can predict a good outcome. And this is the basically manometric typing of achalasia. Type 1 is IRP is more than 15 centimeter and DCI is less than 100 mmHg. Type 2 that you have to discuss with your gastroenterologist whenever you refer patient for manometry. And if manometry is available to you, nowadays it is recommended that every case of dysphagia should be evaluated by manometry. Type 2 is if the pressure is elevated and pan-esophageal pressurization is seen in more than 20% of swallows. And type 3 is IRP more than 20% swallows with DCI is more than 450 mmHg second centimeter. Now, what is IRP? IRP is basically mean esophageal junction pressure. DCI is the amplitude into duration into length of the distal esophageal contraction. That contraction should be greater than 20 mmHg from proximal to distal pressure trough. So then when DCI is more than 450, your manometry report shows DCI is more than 450, you should discuss with the patient that there is a small chance of failures of hilar myotomy in this case. Now, how will you diagnose a failure? Generally, it is a straightforward diagnosis as we do in routine achalasia. Barium swallow, fluoroscopy are useful tests. In most patients with recurrent or persistent symptoms, whenever you do myotomy or manometry, you will find the increase in sphincter length was recorded. This probably reflects the persistence of short segment with a pressure high enough to obstruct the passage of food due to either incomplete myotomy or formations of scar tissue. The formation of scar tissue remains one of the problems for recurrence or failed hilar myotomy. But good thing is, what is the treatment of this? Treatment is in most cases, pneumatic dilatation can still effective after surgery. So you don't have to put every patient of failed hilar myotomy for redo surgeries. Generally, it's preferred after 4 months because of initial fear of perforation. Your balloon pressure should be less than 11, and success rates is reported in various studies up to 80%. So whenever you see failed hilars, your first treatment should be simple pneumatic before offering any other treatment. If that fails, you can of course do redo myotomy, either laparoscopy or POEM. If initial myotomy is inadequate, particularly on gastric side. Dr. Rao suggested that whenever you have done laparoscopy hilar myotomy as the first treatment, then better to refer or take opinion of gastroenterologist for POEM, whether POEM will help or not. Because the main advantage of POEM nowadays is the increased length of myotomy. So it may help particularly in inadequate myotomy. Rarely esophagectomy, grade 4 is a sigmoid esophagus and the problem persists. So most common take home is most common cause of failed is inadequate surgery, particularly on a gastric side. You need to do adequate, if possible, 3 centimeter myotomy on the gastric side, but minimum it should be 2 centimeter. Grade 4 esophagus or Chicago type 3, that is type 3 achalasia. Balloon is still effective in majority of failed hilar myotomy. Now, I just put the two slides. This is a very good consensus guideline, particularly after coming off POEM. published in 2019, and they known as the Seoul Consensus Guideline. I will not go through the whole paper, but this flowchart explains most of the things how to manage achalasia. So whenever you are suspicious of achalasia, of course, endoscopy. Nowadays, you can add CT or EUS to rule out malignancy strictures or anything. Esophagography, high resolution manometry. Manometry is nowadays considered to be a gold standard for diagnosis of achalasia. Then, according to manometry, divide achalasia into type 1, type 2, and type 3. Type 1 and type 3. If your patient is poor surgical candidate or do not want to undergo surgery, you can still go for initial treatment as a balloon dilatation. Laparoscopic Heller myotomy can be offered in type 1, type little bit edge over laparoscopic Heller myotomy. So whenever you see type 3 achalasia, I would like to refer to my gastroenterologist colleague before offering them a surgical treatment. And whenever there is a failed treatment, you can go for balloon dilatation. If balloon dilatation failed, then the POEM or laparoscopic Heller myotomy based on initial surgery. Of course, in high surgical risk, you can try botulinum toxin, but it has a very high failure rate. So that was a brief about surgical failures. Any questions? I have not prepared a detailed talk because Gautam was to speak, but this was in brief.
I mean, but this is it's good enough. It's sort of complete and gives an overview of how you treat diagnose treatment failures. I think that sort of completes the session. Any questions? Chalapati, you want to comment anything here on management of faculty? I mean, it looks pretty simple that most failures require only balloon treatment.
Yeah, I agree, sir. Still, balloon has a good role in regular eclampsia also, especially type 1 or type 2.
1, yes.
But and also post Hellers, definitely. We do offer all types of treatments, but what happened is, I mean, nowadays people are smart, so they Google and come, and some people directly ask for POEM also. So.
Okay. No, yeah. But people may ask, but you can always you have your own protocol which you're going to explain to them.
So all my 9 patients who underwent POEM, they got a surgical consultation also before going for POEM.
I mean, it goes to say that this has to be seen by both, and then decide on how to proceed.
Particularly, sir, in type 3, I would prefer.
Yeah.
Yes. Type 3 definitely by
both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kanchan, you had some question in the previous thing which I didn't really understand. What are your questions, Kanchan, if there are any? You can unmute. Yeah.
Hello, good evening, sir. Sir, my question was now that in a failed Hellers, the mucosa is already exposed. What is the risk of perforation if you go on for a pneumatic dilatation?
Yeah, that was my fear too. Yeah.
Yes, that's in various studies that was considered the main fear of surgeons, and of course I also have that fear. But generally, it is said that if you can offer the pneumatic dilation, particularly after 4 months, it is usually safe, and do not raise your pressure up to the 15. Try to keep it below 11 and do a multiple dilatation if required. And chances of perforation are not that great as it is feared nowadays.
Okay. And sir, one more question. Is there any difference in, like, suppose after failed Hellers, in the time duration, like if the patient presents after 2 years or the patient presents after 5 or 6 years, it depends on the etiology of the recurrence. Is there any difference in the treatment options?
No, I don't think so.
And Dr. Lakshmi can answer.
Yes.
We have to see whether they are coming back with progressive dysphagia, or sometimes there are patients who eat a big bolus of food and they come with a transient dysphagia. So if someone comes 5 years after your cardiomyotomy with some dysphagia, first evaluate them, redo a barium esophagogram, and if that is showing a free flow of dye, then you contrast, then I think you have to counsel them that should learn to eat, chew well and eat more liquidy food, because you always understand they may be progressing on the this thing, esophageal motility problem also. So immediately never jump to offering any redo treatment whenever the patient comes. First find out how long this recurrence has been and evaluate them, do a endoscopy, do a manometry and do a esophagogram. Only when you are very sure that your surgery or any intervention is going to help them, then only embark on a intervention. Or sometimes it is counseling and teaching them how to eat and also explaining about the progression of the disease. Sometimes it's a lot of anxiety which brings them back to you saying that no, I am not feeling comfortable. So after all this, then and also there was a discussion that if you are doing a balloon dilatation in a failed myotomy, the chance of esophageal perforation, but mucosal perforation. But here you understand that because it's an inadequate myotomy, usually they would not have done the proper myotomy crossing the esophageal sphincter. So usually that sphincter is still intact. So partial dilatation would do better, and there's less chance of esophageal perforation. But first you have to see that how much of, is there a real raised esophageal sphincter pressure, or it is something else which the patient is presenting as recurrence of this thing, eclasia.
Ma'am, I think as surgeons, it so happens we operate on a patient and the patient comes back. I think we'll go very slow in sense, we don't admit that the surgery is inadequate or whatever, and we'll try all sorts of, it's like recurrent inguinal hernia. The patient comes, then we'll say, we'll see after 6 months, we'll see if it's progressing. Then, I think surgeons have that.
It's coming late, means after someone has done well with the surgery for 4 or 5 years, and then comes back with the recurrence, then you have to evaluate. But someone is coming within few months after your thing, then you have to doubt your procedure and at least find out what is the reason for his eclasia. Never, because this here, the problem is the person is not able to eat. See, even hernia recurrence will not come with a strangulation immediately. Okay. But here eclasia, the person is suffering that is not able to, he or she is not able to eat. So I think we should not never beat around the bush in these patients. So properly evaluate them. If you feel that the first procedure, whatever it was, has not done good treatment for the patient, then you should go for the next, but only after proper evaluation. We should not immediately jump into thinking of failure of the surgery.
Kanchan, any more questions? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm done, sir. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Lakshmi, as a surgeon, we always prefer Hiller's myotomy, and endoscopist will always prefer the POEM. But always I have a doubt in my mind that is there any immediate post-operative difference in the feeding of the patient? Like endoscopist is approaching through the mucosa first, and we are approaching from the serosa first. And endoscopists, they are applying the clips to the mucosa. So there will be always sacculation behind the mucosa. So is there any difference between the Hiller's and the POEM, immediate post-operative difference you say? Because as you are a surgeon as well as endoscopist, what is your view regarding this?
No, I think anyway we are not starting them on diet immediately. We are starting them on liquids only. So whether
okay, but what is the difference? Minute differences.
Is there a difference?
I don't think so, because I think POEM patients are sent home more earlier than our myotomy patients, and the technical part in the POEM is the submucosal opening is quite high up, away from where you actually start your myotomy. So at where the submucosa is being opened, the muscle is intact there. So that actually prevents a free esophageal perforation. So that's how they can bravely be able to feed their patients immediately post the procedure.
Yeah, Prathapan, you have any comments? Any more comments on this issue before we close? Prathapan?
No, sir. Actually, the late recurrence of achalasia may be part of the natural course of the disease as well, because we are actually doing a palliative procedure for a benign condition, because the major abnormality in achalasia is absence of peristalsis. But we tackle the normal sphincter, because LES is actually normal. Because of the pressure difference is not generated, it is not opening. So there is a natural reason for failure in almost all achalasia. That is why you are getting, on the long term, you are getting sigmoid esophagus and other problems. So first we have to convince the patient that this is not a complete treatment. There is a chance of recurrence, because none of the surgery is 100% effective for achalasia, even in type 1 achalasia.
Prathapan, you have any experience with esophagectomy in achalasia?
No, sir. Esophagectomy never did. Because most of the time, even in sigmoid esophagus, cardiomyotomy gives 2 to 3 years of good dysphagia relief. I think we never attempted.
Dr. Ravichandran might have some experience in this. Sir, Ravichandran sir, have you had any experience with esophagectomy for achalasia cardia, sigmoid esophagus? But you can unmute and comment, sir, if you have any. Anyone? Anyone else? Okay. If there are no comments, then I think we have a reasonably good session on achalasia, and I thank Dr. Lakshmi for taking the time off and presenting her lecture on achalasia. And thanks, Bhavin. Again, thanks everyone, and we shall meet up. So, thank you.
Thank you.